This is Caitlin, your host of the NoSleep4Dramas Podcast, where we get no sleep and survive on coffee to watch just one more episode at night. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the NoSleep4Dramas Podcast. Today we have a movie review for you. Not a new movie. Newish movie. As you guys can see from the title, this is a movie review of Godzilla Minus One. I wanted to do this review because mainly it is on Netflix now. So you have no excuse to not go and watch this movie. Like, it is accessible on Netflix in both color and black and white, which is why I want to do a review on this and get people to go watch this, and allows me to gush about this movie pretty much. I have had a review of this on my blog since December, I want to say, of 2023. It came out in December in theaters, I think. Maybe a little earlier than that. And I went to theaters and actually watched this on the big screen. Phenomenal experience, in my opinion. But now that it's on Netflix in both color and black and white, I wanted to turn the blog post that's been on my blog for about 6 months now, a little longer than that, into a podcast episode so more people can go watch this movie, because everybody needs to. So I'm going to start out this review by saying a little background of it. I'm going to introduce the movie, say some cast, give a little like what they've been in and everything like that, a little background of myself with this movie, and then we're going to go into like synopsis and things, and then we're going to go into like what I loved about this movie. So I'm going to give a little spoiler warning before we go into what I liked and disliked about it. So if you want to go watch this movie before hearing those spoiler stuff, there will be a warning for that. So that being said, let's get into this movie review. It might be a little shorter of an episode this week due to the fact this is a movie review and not like a full-blown J-drama or whatever, but I also loved this movie, so I might just be gushing about it a lot. Also, let me start out this review by saying, by no means am I a Godzilla or Monster Universe expert. Like, I've only seen a handful of the Godzilla movies, some of the older ones, some of the newer ones from the American franchise. So, like, do not consider me like an expert. There's a lot of other people more well-versed in Godzilla lore or even Monsterverse lore than me. So I'm not the expert of this whatsoever. Like, I know very brief history about it, like, and the meaning of Godzilla or whatever. I haven't seen everything. I don't know all of the monsters, nothing like that. So just take this as a fan, like this review as a fan. Like, if I say something that's wrong when it comes to Godzilla lore or whatever, it's just the fact that I'm not an expert in any of this at all. So that's just a fair warning. Just take this review as I say it, not as like, if you want to give me interesting facts about it, go ahead. Like, I will for sure listen to those facts and everything like that. But like, if I say something wrong, it's really just because it's my own interpretation and I don't know the actual fact that's out there. So that being said, just FYI before I start this review. Godzilla Minus One. And I went into this not knowing much, right? And I saw a preview of this movie and I was like, I have to go see this movie. And luckily there's a theater that's somewhat close to my house. And I was like, I can go and watch it there. Cool. And so I literally went there on like a random Tuesday. Like, I happened to be off that day or something. Or maybe it was like a matinee during the weekend. Something. It was like in the middle of the day and I went and watched this. And it was maybe like 20 people in the theater. Like, it was a not packed whatsoever. And I went and watched this movie. And it was my favorite movie of 2023. It honestly probably changed me in some way watching this movie. It is Godzilla Minus One, and I will say this with my entire chest. It is my favorite Godzilla movie and also the best Godzilla movie I have seen. Hands down. Like, there is no competition. If you are a fan of monster movies, if you are a fan of the Godzilla franchise, You need to go and watch this movie. Like, it's on Netflix now. Like, what are you waiting for? It is so much more. Godzilla Minus One is so much more than just another monster movie. You need to go and witness this movie for yourself. Like, I literally have nothing bad to say about this movie. And if we get more monster movies like this one, I will be very happy and I will watch all of them. Quick background. So this is a Godzilla movie that takes place in Japan post World War II, very close to the end. I'm going to rewatch it very soon. And Japan pretty much is still like reeling. Like, it takes place post World War II, but like literally the war just ended pretty much. And they're still kind of reeling from the devastation. They haven't built everything back. And then Godzilla comes and causes destruction and chaos again. So let's go through what this is. And that was like my own little synopsis that I wrote up. So this movie came out November 3rd, 2023. It's just a little over 2 hours long. It's about 5 minutes over, like 2 hours, 5 minutes. It's a Japanese movie. The synopsis says, post-war Japan is at its lowest point when a new crisis emerges in the form of a giant monster baptized in the horrific power of the atomic bomb. As I said multiple times, it is on Netflix in both color and black and white. Please go and watch this movie. I'm going to be saying that a lot. I will say that a lot. The screenwriter and director is by Yamazaki Takashi. He did other movies such as Ghost Book, The Great War of Archimedes. I'm going to mispronounce that. He directed the live action Parasite movies that I referred to in a Versus Showdown episode. He directed Returner, but Parasite, the live adaptation movies, is probably his most famous movie, I will say, but he did other movies. I mean, Godzilla Minus One is probably now his most famous, honestly. Yeah, those are some of his movies that he directed. The main guy, the main role, is played by Kamiki Ryunosuke. I apologize in advance if I butcher any of these names. I don't think I've seen anything else that he has been in. He's been in a ton of dramas, and then as well as a bunch of movies too. But like, he's been in a lot of stuff. We're just gonna say that. But I don't think. I mean, I recognize him from like pictures or whatever, but I don't think I've seen anything other than Godzilla Minus One. If I'm being honest, that he's been in. I'm trying to like find something you guys might know, but like obviously with MDL titles, they're all in Japanese, so like I can't really determine. And plus, I haven't seen anything. Anyway, it stars Ramiki Ryunosuke. He's fantastic in this. Like really, really, really good in Godzilla Minus One. Like, I can't say enough of like how good he's in it. Let's see. So drama that you guys might recognize him. It was in Kanto Gan Hijimaru or Life's Punchline. I think that's on Netflix somewhere. Yeah. So he's the main guy. He's our main character. And then it's also starring Hamabe Minami. She's the main actress. So you might recognize her from New World Makers, or you might recognize her from My Daughter Doesn't Have a Boyfriend. That was a couple years back. Kakiguri, which I think is both on Netflix. So she was in the live action of that. She's pretty well known too. It also stars Yamada Yuki. I mean, Yamada Yuki's been in like everything, honestly. He's done a ton of dramas. High and Low, he's been in a couple of those. He's been in Miss Sherlock. He was a guest role in that. Three Papas, which I think recently just came to Netflix or Viki on, I think. He's been in a lot of the High and Low movie or dramas, actually. Itazura Nakis, which is an older one. He played the second male lead in that. That's where I first know him from. He's a hilarious character in that. Kingdom, he's been in some of the Kingdom movies. Some of the other supporting actors, Aoki Minki. I cannot talk today. Aoki Minetaka. Jeez. Sorry. This is like my third podcast episode I'm recording in a row, and obviously my mouth doesn't want to talk anymore. But anyway, you might recognize him from the Copy Girl one. What is the English title of this? Pretty Proofreader. That's what it was. He's in that. Let's see. Sasaki Kuranosuke. He also is a very prominent Japanese actor. You might recognize him from Don't Call It Mystery. I think he was one of the cops in that. Yeah, there's just a ton of people in here. Endo Yuya, he is a very prominent actor. He was in the Sealer movie, or the Sealer J-drama that came out in 2022. I think that's on Viki now. He was a cop in that. He's also in Voice, the Japanese adaptations of Voice. He was in that too. So yeah, there's a ton of people in the supporting cast you'll recognize, but the main two people are Kamiki Ryunsuke and Hamabe Minami. They're pretty much the two leads roles, and then there's a couple of the supporting cast that are like well-known support roles. So that's pretty much the cast and the synopsis of the movie. I mean, it's a Godzilla movie. Well, yeah. So when I watched this in theaters, I had only watched one trailer, and I like watched that trailer. I was like, okay, I need to go see this movie. I was like, it looks different. It looks different from like what a monster movie in my mind was before this movie. And I think that's kind of what like drew me to go and watch this movie, because it seemed like really refreshing and different, because the story and perspective of what a monster movie was just so unique when it came to this movie, just from watching the trailer, not even seeing the movie first. So I watched the trailer and I was like, I have to go see this. I have to see if like this is as different as it looks. So I'm gonna now go into what I loved about this movie. So if you want to go watch this movie and you do not want spoilers, please do not continue. This is your spoiler warning. I'm going to be talking in length about spoilers about this drama, or this movie, sorry. So if you do not want spoilers and you want to go watch this movie before you hear about anything, this is your spoiler warning. Go click play on Netflix now. Even if you do want spoilers, go watch this movie and come back. Like, I'm okay with that. Please go watch this movie on Netflix. Like, please. Also, fun fact, I think this one, what did this win? This one won an Oscar for visual effects? I don't remember. It did win an Oscar. And I want to say it was graphics or visual effects. Let me Google this really quick. Yeah, best visual effects. So this movie won an Oscar for best visual effects, which is historic. Like, I think it was the first Japanese drama to do that, so, or movie to do that. So but yeah, on Netflix you can either watch the color version or the black and white. I saw the colored version in theater, so they actually released the black and white in theater as well after the movie came out. I never went and watched it, but maybe I'll watch the black and white now that it's on Netflix. I'm sure it's like a completely different like look and feel of it. I think also Godzilla hit a major anniversary last year, or maybe this year, like 20th, 60th, something like that. I can't remember. I think I heard that they were going through like an anniversary last year. Let me quickly. Yeah. But Godzilla's anniversary is celebrated November 3rd, which marks the release date of the original Godzilla movie in 1954. So let's say it was the 5th in this year. I think it's 70th this year, November 3rd. I could be wrong. It might be last year. Either way, 70th it might be this year. But anyway, I want to go and watch the black and white version on Netflix. I think it would be really, really cool. Anyway, so this is your spoiler warning. We are moving into spoiler territory. Okay. So the first thing I loved about this movie is Godzilla. Like, it's a monster movie, obviously. What do you want to see when you go to a monster movie? You want to see the monster, of course. And you want to see the monster causing chaos and leaving utter destruction behind it. This version of Godzilla in Godzilla Minus One is terrifying. Like, it's terrifying. It does not care about human life. It has no remorse. It just destroys and levels everything. And if you know anything about Godzilla and like the history behind it and the reason it exists, is it's common knowledge that like the Godzilla has always been the representation of the nuclear bombs dropped on Japan during World War II. So just imagine a movie where Japan has already seen and dealt with that once with World War II, and then add Godzilla on top of that. And that is the level of destruction you will see in this movie. Like, it's devastating sometimes watching this movie. Like, just I remember being in theaters and just being like, oh my god. Like, it was one of those things where I've seen Godzilla movies before, but nothing like this. Like, nothing where he's just terrifying. I couldn't believe it. It was a sight to see, to say the least. Okay, another thing I liked about this movie was the human element. So a highlight for me in this movie was the humans. Like, you got well-rounded, well-written humans in this movie. You have a nation and a group of people dealing with the aftermath of World War II. So you have these characters dealing with PTSD and trauma and survivor's guilt. And this movie creates pockets of like touching moments that display this human connection amongst this chaos of first World War II and then the chaos of Godzilla. And that causes the audience to like connect and actually care about these human characters. So you as an audience member want to see these characters survive and thrive in this post World War II and hopefully post Godzilla Japan. And that's just something that I have not experienced in a monster movie before. Like, it's always just like you care about the monster and you care about the monster and what destruction and chaos they bring, and the humans are an afterthought. And so it was refreshing to see a monster movie that has humans that you can relate to and you can connect with. And it's just the human element of Godzilla Minus One is just something really special and something you kind of need to witness for yourself. Because, like, I think even if you took Godzilla out of the picture in this movie, you still had a really good story and things that would move you and connect you to this post-World War II story. And Godzilla kind of just added an extra level to it. So the human element just really stood out to me for this movie, and I loved it a lot. Like, probably some of the best humans of a Godzilla movie I've ever seen. And I think I've spoke about this before, but like, I think the reason why the human element of this movie was done so well is like, it was the writing, of course, but also it was acted phenomenally. Like, there's a lot of talented Japanese actors in this movie. You'll recognize a ton of them. Acting was superb, and it just helped a lot when it came to the audience caring about these human characters and what they were dealing with these movies. Because, as I said, you could remove Godzilla and still have a post-World War II movie that was pretty good, because you had these human characters dealing with real human problems like PTSD and trauma and trying to build a life after World War II mixed in with this Godzilla. So the acting was superb. The acting was really good and just really, really good. Another thing that I really liked is the time period that this movie took place. Like, given the fact that Godzilla Minus One was set post World War II, really close to the end of World War II, adds a uniqueness to this movie. Like, I have not seen a lot of Godzilla movies, but I have not seen any Godzilla movies set in this time period. Granted, there might be one out there and I just haven't seen it yet, but being in this time period just adds something really unique and special for this movie. It causes the movie to, I think, like, have higher stakes than any of the other Godzilla movies I've seen. Like, during World War II, Japan had their military disarmed and most of their weapons were destroyed. Just a little, like, history lesson for you. So post World War II, Japan was just not equipped to deal with Godzilla. So after they had their military disarmed and most of their weapons destroyed, and then you bring on Godzilla, and they're just not equipped for it, which causes more chaos and destruction. And then you add on the fact that, like, due to the atomic bomb and, like, just war in general, they haven't really rebuilt anything either. So again, adding Godzilla into the mix to this post-World War II setting and landscape is just, it adds a very different background and story for the humans, and humans in this film, but also just the story in general. Just it adds a unique element to it, and it just adds so much to the narrative of this movie overall. And then the other things that I loved about this movie, CGI and graphics. I remember being blown away, like just blown away by the CGI and graphics of this film. Like I didn't really have expectations when I went into this movie. I saw one trailer, and I remember that one trailer really wasn't a trailer. It was more like a teaser. It kind of just showed shots of the different scenes and then had some really famous music that like we recognize from the Godzilla franchise in general. And that was it. So like I really went into this movie and I didn't really have any expectations. Like I didn't know what to expect. It's not that I didn't have expectations. I didn't know what to expect. Like the whole reason why I was going to see this movie is because it looked so different from the trailer, from anything that I had watched prior, and just like, or anything I had seen from any other Godzilla movie, whether I just watched the trailer or I actually watched the movie. Like it just seemed so different. And so I went into this movie with pretty much no expectations because I didn't know what to expect. I had no comparison to it, really. And so I was watching this movie and I was just like blown away by the CGI and graphics of this film. Like the first time that Godzilla charged his atomic breath and it went off, I just sat there with my mouth open. Like it was just like, I just couldn't believe it. I like the sequence of events that were shown between how the design of Godzilla lent to the charging of his atomic breath to the complete devastation that was left over after this scene was just something else. It was just like, I was like, wow. And then I know with like every Godzilla design, every version tries to be unique and different and kind of like one-ups itself, or just like is unique and different in terms of like what they did in the movie. And this version of Godzilla, to me, stands out. Like it just how the atomic breath scene was shot. Like the camera like pans down and every spine on his back lit up, and then also kind of like it was, you could tell he was charging because the spine like popped out of his back. Like that whole uniqueness of it is like, oh, he's charging up. It's not just colors going through his back. It's like popping out of his back and just charging up, and then you're like, oh god, this is going to be dramatic and destructive. And just like the anticipation of him finally doing his atomic breath after that entire charge up was just like, wow. And then finish watching the movie, and I go and I read more about it, and I realize they did this on, what was it? It was like I think it was a $4 million budget. Let me Google this really quick to make sure. No, it was 15 million. I apologize. My assumption was a lot yet less. $15 million to make this movie. And I knew this number after the fact, after I watched this. And I was just like, I remember reading that number and I'm like, my God, they did that with $15 million. Like, that's hard to do. Like, some of these American movies are like hitting $150 million to make. Like, some of the Marvel ones or some of the other Godzilla ones are like $15 million with this budget, and they make Godzilla Minus One. That was impressive. And it doesn't show. Like, you don't go into this movie and you're like, oh, it's only $15 million budget. Like, it's not going to look expensive. It looks great, in my opinion. He looked scary. Godzilla looks goddamn scary in this movie. Like, the other scene that I will never forget is like, the first time they see him, he's not even like, the atomic breath scene isn't the first time you see him. It's like, I think it was the first time, or maybe I should have rewatched the movie before recording this, but like, it's in the trailer. It's in one of the trailers. It's one of the most like remembered images from this movie now. But Godzilla pops out of the water and he's like swimming behind the boat, and he's like, they're shooting these bombs that they're picking up and throwing in his mouth, and just the image of him swimming behind this boat and his head slowly coming out of the water and like planning on eating them, basically. I was like, that's done on a $15 million budget. Like, that's crazy. That's nuts. So the CGI and graphics were great, in my opinion, especially with that budget. Yeah. The other thing that kind of stood out for me was the music. I thought the music for this film was beautiful. I remember after watching this movie, I pretty much listened to the soundtrack on repeat for months. I still do. I still randomly turn it on. It's beautiful, and it also like complemented the film really well. Like, after I watched the film, I learned the film had like reused some of the original and iconic music from the Godzilla franchise. So if you're a fan of the franchise, you'll recognize a lot of the music, especially the older music. And I thought that was just like really cool that they were like, okay, we're gonna reuse some of these really iconic sequences and music from these other movies and kind of like go back to square one. Again, this franchise has been happening for like 70 years at this point. And we've seen a lot of like directions, a lot of different directions being taken in this franchise. And I don't know, Godzilla Minus One kind of seemed to me as like a reboot. We've seen all kinds of Godzillas. We've seen the destructive Godzilla. I mean, I think that was the kind of like the first iteration. Is he was a monster. He was supposed to be destroying things. He was not supposed to be the good guy. And then eventually we got other movies where he would team up with other people to take down other people, which was fine. Or he would like team up with the humans to take down and save the humans. And then the American franchise came in and they also made him look more as like the good guy. But originally Godzilla was a monster. He was the bad guy. He was the villain. So the Godzilla Minus One kind of, to me, seemed like a reboot, like a go back to what it was supposed to be and what it's used to be and its roots and that type of thing. And it played that very well. So I think that is also what was unique with this movie, is like, if you're used to these newer movies where the Godzilla is the hero and plays the good guy, this is a completely different take for people who have not seen the original movies or older movies where he is the villain. Completely new take. Granted, people who have seen other Godzilla movies know it's not a new take because the older movies did it, but it really felt like Godzilla Minus One was a reboot, that they want to continue with him being the villain, the monster. So I thought that was really unique, and the fact that they kind of played around with the music with that. They told that story with it, as they pulled out the old original music with it, and the music just complemented the movie so well. So if you're a fan of the Godzilla franchise, you'll immediately recognize this music and love this music. And as I said, I listened to the OST of this movie for a really long time after I first watched this. But yeah, and it's just like, this movie is special. Like, it just changed my perspective of what a monster movie could be. Because I think one of the reasons why I have not gotten into the monster franchise is, one, it seems like a bunch of the reviews that have been coming out lately about these movies across the board is they're all kind of one note. Like, people want to go see the destruction, but there's no human element. There's nothing really connect to. Sometimes the monsters don't even work out. Like, and that's just from reviews I've seen. And I remember when I think I came across this movie first because I saw like a review of it on TikTok or something. And it's a Japanese movie. It was not like widespread in theaters. So like, you kind of had to look for it. And then it became well known through reviews and TikTok and stuff. So then it got more releases. And then obviously it won an Oscar eventually. But it just goes to show, because I think there was an American Godzilla movie that came around the same time, or maybe after, and I just remember seeing reviews and comparing them to, and Godzilla Minus One like blew it out of the water. Like, it did not. The American one that came out, and I can't remember which one came out, but like, it just didn't live up to how amazing this movie was. And again, I mean, you watch it for the movie, you watch it for the monster destruction, obviously. Like, I mean, who doesn't go to a monster movie and see the destruction, like, want to see destruction and want to see this monster completely obliterating cities? You'd be lying if you went to a monster movie and you didn't want to see that. But the emotion of the humans behind this movie was just so beautiful to watch. I think in general, so this is a monster movie, but you also have Runosuke's character is dealing with a lot. So he is actually the first scene, honestly, we actually see Godzilla is like really freaky. Actually, it's not when he's swimming behind the boat. It's the first scene you see is I think it's the first scene in the movie is so Kimiki Ryunosuke plays this pilot, this fighter pilot who they're all on this island and he's on this base, and Godzilla goes on to the island and basically destroys this base and pretty much kills everybody on the island. And we all know, like, historically, Japan had like kamikaze pilots. And so there was this thought process in World War II and other wars, obviously, too, is like, if you didn't die, you were a coward, you were a traitor, you needed to die to get the honor. And his main character, didn't die in this and kind of was viewed as a traitor by his fellow soldiers who did survive still. He also kind of like was a coward and whatever. So he had a lot of PTSD because he had countered Godzilla already, and no one really believed that this was the reason why his base like blew up. But also he had a lot of survivor's guilt because he was dealing with the fact that he should have died that day, and whether that was a kamikaze or just like survived and really shouldn't have. And so you saw his story from the beginning of the movie where he really was shut off from the world and trying to decide what he was going to do. Like, was he going to commit suicide later, even though that would really be not a good way to go? Like, he already survived a war when he should have been a kamikaze, but to commit suicide later would also be traitorish in a way. But also, he wanted revenge on this Godzilla monster. So when he found out he actually did exist and was like doing destruction, he was like, okay, I'm going to go figure out a way I can go fight this thing and kind of do a round two that he was supposed to get in World War II. And then on top of that, he meets Hamabe Minami's character, and they end up cohabitating, really. Like, she kind of like waltzes into his house and is like, I'm staying with this kid. And so she starts living with the guy. They kind of start creating a family, whatever. And so he eventually, even though he's really standoffish and like just has a bunch of issues himself from the war, they start having a relationship in like companionship as it started off with. And then in this really destructive scene, she dies, and then he really spirals and he's like, I really need to kill this Godzilla dude. So not only is he getting like revenge for what happened in World War II with Godzilla, he also added on to the fact of this woman's death that he thought she had died. It's his journey through this movie of going through PTSD and survivor's guilt and just like accepting that he's might have to die in this scenario, and then dealing on top of that with this Hamabe's death too, just was a beautiful acting job. For one, like, he did a great job with his acting job, but also just it was a journey within itself, which is why I said you could eliminate Godzilla and still have a pretty powerful post-war movie with this. And then the actions of other people in this movie by the end. So like of course they like led up to this whole end of the movie is like, we're going to take Godzilla down. And so what was beautiful about this too is like you had a bunch of these people working together, trying to figure out a way to get him, to kill him, to stop the destruction and like actually get past this. And the idea was that they were going to sink him and basically like blow him up, if I remember correctly. And what they had to do though is they had to get a bunch of boats out there because they all did this in the water. He wasn't going to come to the land, and they were going to try to avoid human casualties as much as possible. So they all were trying to do this in the water, and then at the last ditch effort, Kamiki Ryunosuke realized it wasn't going to work. So he pulled a kamikaze and like flew his plane into Godzilla. And again, we all thought he died. And then it realized later that a pilot that he had fought with in World War II and actually didn't have a good relationship with, because they all said like he was supposed to die then, helped him survive by pulling an ejection seat. And this is why I'm saying spoilers here, because that was a whole thing, a whole emotional scene, and you thought he died. And just that whole sequence of events was just, I was watching this movie on the edge of my seat. I was like, oh my God, he just died. He just did a kamikaze. Like, I can't believe it. It was just like, you got so invested in this movie due to the humans that it was just something really special and really unique about it. And the fact that this essentially was a post-World War II movie, and Godzilla was just like the icing on the cake. It was just such a unique combination that you don't get from any other movie. It's just the acting was powerful, the scenes and the dialogue, like him dealing with his PTSD, and Hamabe Minami like is in there and is like, you need to forgive yourself, you can't deal with this anymore. Like that entire conversation, the little quiet moments and these conversations that they had together, or they were on this boat picking up these landmines, or not landmines, but they were like mines in the sea. Japan had dropped a ton of them during World War II, so people couldn't make it to land. So now, post World War II, they had to go pick them up. And these crazy people would go and pick them up because they obviously could explode. And because Kamiki Ryunosuke was like, I need to die because I was supposed to die in World War II, he took on the job. So they're out in this ocean finding these bombs and exploding them themselves so they wouldn't hit another boat. And just the conversations they had about themselves on the boat too were really touching, because you found out about other people in the support group or supporting like cast members, like what they were thinking and what they went through during the war. And Kamiki Ryunosuke's like character he said a lot of his thoughts out loud, which weren't always good. And you find out more about his character and what's going on with his head. Like, it was so touching sometimes. And these quiet moments were just highlights of the movie for me. And then you add Godzilla into the mix and everything goes boom. Like, everything is just like destruction after destruction. Because like sometimes with these Godzilla movies and these monster movies, you kind of care for the monster more than you do the human. And in this movie, that is not the case. Like, Godzilla has, as I said, has no remorse, has no emotion, does not care about these humans whatsoever. And it shows. Like, the destruction of this movie is another level. I have nothing bad to say about this movie. Like, nothing bad whatsoever. Like, I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. I don't remember why I didn't give it a 10 out of 10. But I didn't write it in my review. I absolutely adored this movie. It was my favorite movie of 2023. If you're a fan of the Godzilla franchise, if you're a fan of monster movies, if you want a neat perspective of a monster movie, one I have never seen done in a monster movie before, you need to go watch this movie. You need to watch it on Netflix, like right now. Please, I need to rewatch this movie. I'm probably going to end recording this and go and watch it because I haven't watched it in 6 months. Like, it is an unbelievably good movie. Like, it's just so good. And I really hope they continue this. I really hope they do another movie, like multiple movies, because the direction that this movie took is just so good and so unique. And it really impacts you. It's really different and really good. I need more people to go watch this movie, which is why I'm reviewing this as a podcast episode, because more people need to witness this movie. So, please go and watch this movie. It's on Netflix in both color and black and white. I don't know how many people I've told in my real life to go watch this movie and no one actually has yet. So please go watch it. If you have seen this movie, please let me know what you think. Please let me know what you think. Whether you saw it in theaters or on Netflix, DM me, let me know what you thought. But that's my review for this movie. I know I kind of went on a real big tangent, but really this review is to convince people to go watch this movie. I have nothing bad to say about this movie. Godzilla Minus One is my favorite movie of 2023. If you do watch this movie after this review, please DM me and tell me what you thought. Do you agree or disagree with my review? Anything. I want to talk about this movie more, which is why I'm making a podcast episode of it, because this review has been on my blog for a while. But yeah, that is my movie review of Godzilla Minus One. It's on Netflix in both color and black and white. Do yourself a favor and go watch this movie. I cannot tell you guys to do that more. I will repeat myself to the end of my days to go watch this movie. It is so good. Yeah, that's my review of Godzilla Minus One. Bye. If you want to continue the conversations about dramas that were started in this episode, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter under the username NoSleep4Dramas. That is no sleep, the number 4 dramas, just like in the title of the podcast. This podcast is also an expansion of my blog, so you can visit my blog at www.NoSleep4Dramas.com, the number 4 dramas.com, and find multiple years of blog posts already available at your fingertips. All links are in the description of this episode. This has been an episode of the No Sleep for Dramas podcast, and I am your host, Caitlin. I will see you here next time, and I hope you get no sleep chasing the next episode just like me. Good night.